This is the best of Game On 2022 with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
It's the best of Game On 2022, Part 2, here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. I'm Johnny Montalbano, joined by Hank Indictor, as I've been all year long. Hank, we had an unbelievable first half to 2022, and, when we took the show into the summertime, I was wondering, summertime usually is a time where we get a chance to maybe get a little bit of a break in the sporting world. It's a time where we start to get a little bit of a transition where we go from the winter sports championships. We had our Stanley Cup and NBA finals. We get into the summertime, and usually that's a time to get a little bit of a break, maybe in July and August, get that transition from baseball continuing to football. But I tell you what, this summer, there were no breaks. I mean, I remember you and I being on nonstop throughout the summer, and there were definitely a lot of storylines that happened in the second half of the year. And even outside of the four major sports, we started in late July talking about Vince McMahon. He was involved in a hush money investigation, and then he decided, as this investigation was occurring, that he was going to announce his retirement, and that definitely sparked a big deal in the wrestling world.
Yeah, definitely. I remember that very well. And it was sort of a good old Vince McMahon moment. I don't know. It doesn't really quite have the same ring as a certain baseball commissioner that you and I have taken much pleasure in shaming, as well as the rest of the ETB crew. But yeah, it seemed like there was no such thing as a slow news day I'm not even going to say the summer of 22, just the year of 22 as a whole. It was really crazy. But then, obviously, we also had some baseball news. One really sad news in the passing of Vin Scully, who you could probably make the argument, and there's really no wrong answer to this debate, that he was one of, if not the greatest voices of MLB. He called so many games for the Dodgers. In fact, I believe there were people who lived and died during his time as the announcer as the Dodgers, as well as some great World Series moments. And the crazy news, of course, being the Fernando Tatis suspension. I mean, hey, Nick apparently must have known what he was talking about when he said that the Padres should have voided that contract. The extent of why they should have voided it, well, did not see that coming, and I don't think any of us did. But then, obviously, we also had the suspension of Deshaun Watson and, some KD drama, which, seems like what is it with those net stars and trouble seeming to follow them all over the place.
I just going back a couple of seconds here. I mean, obviously, when you talk about sports announcers, or you talk about announcing in general, one of the first names, I thought the first thing you think about is Vin Scully. And Vin was great. Obviously, we know him from baseball, but he had one of the more memorable football calls too. You remember Dwight Clark, absolutely, in the playoffs for sure. And then as the summer went on, you were talking about Fernando Tatis Jr. I remember, we were talking about him because he was nearing his return from the offseason wrist injury that he suffered. And just as he was very close to returning, I think he was like a week or so out from being back, boom, bombshell story that he tests positive for a banned substance, 80-game suspension. And that is something that is going to be lingering into 2023 for the San Diego Padres. But obviously, Hank, when you talk about 2022, one name always sticks out, and that's Deshaun Watson. And in late August, we finally got a verdict in the Deshaun Watson case. And what it ended up being was that there was a settlement between the NFL and NFLPA where Watson gets suspended for 11 games, gets fined $5 million. Coincidence? I think not, because that 11-game suspension meant that he would return in Week 13 to face his old team, the Houston Texans. And speaking of that, another name, like you mentioned, that 2022 would not be filled without, would be, well, a team would be the Brooklyn Nets, one player specifically, Kevin Durant. And there was definitely a lot of drama that we saw in part one with Kevin Durant. And here we found out that Durant decided that he was actually going to remain with the team. We remember we were talking about him, whether it was either going to be keep me or get rid of the coach or the GM. Well, it turns out that he decided that he will remain with the team. Obviously, as the season started, 7 games in, Steve Nash was canned anyway. But that was just some of the craziness that happened. Let's go take a look back in time through the summer of 2022 at what's been a crazy run. The big story that broke in wrestling, we were talking about it with Tom Albano a few weeks ago about when the Vince McMahon news broke. And now he tweeted out a couple of days ago that he, at age 77, officially announcing his retirement as chairman of WWE. And they have Steph McMahon stepping in and Khan as well. And yes, we do know that the investigation into the hush money payments still going on with Vince, but until that can be settled, we can really only talk about what Vince has done for wrestling as an entertainment and as a sport. And look, there's no doubt the legacy that he leaves behind in terms of wrestling. I mean, I remember watching it back in the day, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and just how popular it was. And, he was a big reason for that. I think, the biggest downfall that wrestling had was the day that they bought WCW. And I think it took them a very long time to get over that. And now what WWE has to deal with is, all these other wrestling, leagues, and even MMA, UFC, which is kind of overtaken it in some ways, even though it's not wrestling, but it's that mixed martial arts stuff. But Hank, I don't know how big of a wrestling fan you are. I go back to the late 90s and early 2000s, with The Rock, Austin, Triple H, all that stuff. See, I think the thing with those days is there were more. The talent was so different back then compared to today. And I think Vince had a big say in all that. But, there's no doubt that, when you think of wrestling, he's one of, if not the first names you think about.
Yeah, for sure. I think the idea that that the WWE will continue, but he's no longer going to be there, no matter how bad those scandals were, it definitely feels very strange. And yeah, I'm going to be honest, I'm not nearly as familiar with the WWE as you are, but with that being said, like it's a case of good old Vince McMahon. No, do you think this whole scandal that he pretty much left the sport worse, like now that he's gone? And, and I've heard a lot of other crazy stories about that guy too. Like, didn't you guys send me like some link once with
you could, I mean, you know what, if you had a wrestling show here on, and I know Tom Albano is starting the
Tom
MMA
would know
show.
way more about this than I would. I'm very ill-qualified to talk about it. Tom would know a lot more about all the crazy things that Vince McMahon has done.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that Tom, Nick, and Nick we'll discuss it a lot more on Wednesday's Empty the Bench. But
I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, what Vince was able. I mean, look, he was a part of wrestling almost. It exploded in 1999 and the early 2000s too. I mean, if it was being talked about those days like what today. I mean, you have the network, you have social media. If those things were around back then I mean, this thing would almost rival a major sport. It was that popular, it was that intense. I just remember though when I watched it for the longest time, the day that they bought WCW, I think changed it and ruined it. And you had that invasion of all those WCW, ECW guys coming into it, and I just think that wrestling was a kind of thing that I think you could work with multiple leagues, not just one. But the other thing too, though, is, and I guess this could be a conspiracy or something like that. We could throw out there with the investigations into the hush money payments that Vince is dealing with right now. The fact that he retires instead of resigning or stepping aside, does that have something to do with it? And yes, now. WWE does have a deal with Peacock. Yes, that is true. We do know that. But I had brought it up with Tom on the show a few weeks ago when we had him on. If Vince had stayed on and you started losing these sponsorship deals or these deals with Peacock or WWE Network or all the sponsorships, Vince would have been fired. Or he would have been forced to step away. And that's just the reality of the world that we live in. You know, when you start getting into the money angle of it, that's when, that's where they take a hit. And until we know exactly what happens, though, and what officially comes out of it, I mean, Vince retiring, I mean, look, he left wrestling in a great spot. I don't know how well it's going to do now with Steph taking over. The problem is, like I had said, you've got other leagues. You've got also a sport in mixed martial arts, which is as popular as it ever is. I mean, UFC stuff. I mean, you see, before you even see the main events on pay-per-view, you've got undercards on ESPN for like 6 hours leading up to it. So UFC and the MMA stuff, it's more popular than it's ever been before. And if that was around back in the day when wrestling hit its peak, it'd be a different story.
Yeah, definitely, for sure.
But, yeah, so Vince, even if you aren't a wrestling fan, you know the name. And even if you are a sports fan, and you know what, though, Hank? Even if you are a sports fan, you know the name because of the XFL.
And also, being a Sacred Heart alumni, there's a cafeteria there's a lunch cafeteria called Linda's, and it is named after Linda McMahon, his wife, who donated a lot of money to where I went to school. And so, yeah.
I mean, heck, you know about, the McMahon name in general, about, because, Linda also
served. I used to drive past the WWE building many a time, and I live like not too far from it.
Oh, that's right, because it's in Stamford, Connecticut. Yep. That's right. Yep. I know that well. AEW. Yep. AEW's out there right now, and that has a couple of former WWE guys there. And that's what I was saying. You have all these other things branched out. That's why I thought That's why I thought also helped the WWE back in the day was, you had these other, other companies like WCW and ECW. And so you would have that kind of competition. I think competition for wrestling is good. But now you've got something, when you have a whole other sport that includes kind of like wrestling, it changes it all up. Say, what if ESPN had actually picked up WWE? That would have been something back in the day. See, I think the problem also with the wrestling now, with WWE in particular, just the talent level is nowhere near what it used to be. And that's in both genders. And I will fight that till the day I die. No pun intended with the wrestling part. But the talent level today, and I say this as somebody who hasn't watched wrestling in 20 years, the talent level that's out there today is nowhere near what it was back then. And you know what? Talent sells. It sells in all sports. It sells in life in some ways. But we will see where this transpires, and now we'll see what it's going to be like now with Steph taking over and Khan also as well. It'll be very, very interesting to see what happens. But when this news broke, you had not only wrestlers, but you even had the sporting world reacting to this because it's a big deal. The McMahon name has been in wrestling for, I want to say 5 decades. It's been that long. And Vince has been a big reason why, Shane, his son, Linda and Steph, and they're still going to be there, but it won't be the same without Vince. That is for sure. Hank, some sad news, though, in the baseball and really in the sports world, and speaking of the Dodgers, was Tuesday night. So as we go to bed Tuesday night, post-trade deadline, news came down that Vin Scully passed away at 94. And, you don't even need to be a sports fan really to know about Scully. And, boy, so many things, to discuss regarding him. Everybody focuses him being the Dodger announcer for 67 years, but you know what? I remember him, obviously the 86 World Series with the Mets, he was on the call there. He did golf. If you were watching the PGA Tour on CBS this weekend, they were showing his golf highlights that he did. And remember, one of his actually more famous calls was the 49er playoff game with Dwight Clark. So
January 5th, 1982.
Right. So, it's just so many memories with Vin. We almost could spend an entire separate episode talking about Vin Scully. But Hank, what are your memories about him?
I think it's astounding that during the years in which he called the Dodgers, there are people who lived and died during that whole span. 67 years with one franchise. And, he came up, and what's scary? He was probably younger than we are right now when he made his debut with the Dodgers. I think the story goes somebody saw him call a game for Fordham. I think it got the attention of Red Barber, and he called games with Red Barber. And Red Barber pretty much knew that he was a natural with the Brooklyn Dodgers. And he called, I believe, 25 World Series, 12 All-Star games, at least 20 no-hitters, and I know 3 perfect games, one of which would have been Sandy Koufax. And I actually remember not too long ago, I was listening to one of his calls. I think it was when Koufax threw the perfect game against the Chicago Cubs, August 1965. I love how he sets the stage, giving everyone the time of night, what was going on, and then Sandy into his windup. Here's the pitch. Swung on and missed. A perfect game. 1-0. The LA Dodgers would beat the Chicago Cubs in that game, and they go on to win that World Series that year. And then what also isn't talked about was he called Hank Aaron's 715th home run, April 8th, 1974. And, you mentioned a lot of the World Series calls he made. For me, my personal favorite call that he made was probably October 25th, 1986, Game 6. If you don't know which moment that I'm talking about, you either don't care about baseball or you're living under a rock. Mookie Wilson up at that.
Yep.
It gets through Buckner. Here comes Knight, and the Mets win it. And then that actually isn't my favorite part of the call. No talking for like maybe 5-10 minutes. All you hear is the crowd noise and the celebration, which if you're listening to this right now, if you're a broadcaster or you're trying to become a broadcaster, that's what you're supposed to do after a big moment. Less is more. You let the crowd talk. And then Vin Scully had the perfect line. If one picture is worth 1,000 words, you have seen about 1,000,000 words. But more than that, you have seen a bizarre finish to Game 6 of the 1986 World Series. The Mets are not only alive, they are well, and they will play Game 7 tomorrow night, even though the rain actually proved it wrong. It was actually 2 nights later.
Right.
Yeah, no, that whole statement afterwards, I was like, wow. And then, of course, the Kirk Gibson home run. I mean,
sure, I was actually just about to get there. Was one of my favorites, the '88 World Series, especially considering the moment. And if you remember Kirk Gibson, who was hobbling to the plate and
could barely walk.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I was watching the game because obviously that was before I was born. But I go back and I watched all the highlights and stuff. Yeah, there's so many great
and
calls.
Look who's coming up.
Yep. And I mean, it was even a lot of people don't remember. I mean, I don't remember him doing golf until I saw the highlights just a couple of days ago. He's done golf. Obviously, we know about the 49er catch in the playoffs. I mean, he's done football. I mean, a lot of memorable moments. I mean, in this day and age, you think about it, like the old school announcers, they're almost all gone. It's but. Yeah, no.
Now, by the way, I also want to give you another interesting fun fact regarding Vin Scully that isn't really talked about. So obviously he's been associated with the LA Dodgers, but he's also called pretty much some significant events at Candlestick Park, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
Well, obviously because the Dodgers and the Giants were rivals, but one of the ones was the one that we just mentioned being the catch, but also he called what probably was the last game on the NBC Game of the Week at Candlestick Park. That was Game 5 when the Giants beat the Cubs in 5 games to go to the World Series, which, if you know that World Series, that was the one that was delayed because of the earthquake. But
sure.
And then also he, interestingly enough, called the last game at Candlestick Park, which I believe the Dodgers ended up beating the Giants September 30th, 1999. And I think that he was actually interviewed during halftime of the last game at Candlestick Park, which turned out to be the game where Navarro Bowman had that pick 6 to seal a playoff spot for the 49ers against the Atlanta Falcons. So there's a lot of interesting fun facts where you and I can go on and on about Vin Scully. In fact, I'm also going to go out on a limb and say he's probably narrated the most World Series highlight films out of anybody.
I just think also one thing too was if you ever watched a Dodger game or a broadcast he could also tell stories.
Oh my gosh!
Do it at the perfect time too. Like, during the game. I mean, he could do it early in the game, and you hear stories. I mean, you could go on stories for days. And remember, I mean, doing the game solo. I mean, it doesn't happen. Nope, that doesn't happen. There's nobody that does games solo anymore on TV, and even on radio. I mean, it's very, very rare. I mean, you have maybe one play-by-play guy, but you always have a partner there. And Vin, when he was in LA, did it by himself, and he could do it by himself. So, this hit, because obviously being a huge sports fans as we are, I mean, the name, the memories. I mean, he's been behind some of the best calls in baseball and sports history. I mean, he even goes behind baseball, like we just said. So, a tremendous loss, but full life lived. Look, we all hope that we could live a life like Vin Scully did, right? I mean, he'll be missed. I mean, that's for sure. But you know what? I'd say it was a very tough transition. One of the people I actually thought about, I went back to watch the highlight of it, was actually the Dodgers broadcast right now with Joe Davis, because you remember he took over when Vin retired. I mean, very tall order, but Joe Davis has stepped in and he's done a tremendous job. And I know he got very, very emotional. I almost got choked up on the air when the moment happened, because if you remember, last week the news was announced when the Dodgers were playing the Giants. So,
and what's kind of interesting about that? Vin Scully actually grew up a Giants fan in Manhattan. It was in the Bronx or Manhattan.
Yeah, no, that's true.
He also called his last game against the Giants in 2016, and that was when he made his now famous farewell speech, which anytime I watch that, it brings a tear to my eye. Like, anytime I just listen to Vin Scully talk, it gave me the chills. He's that special, and you don't see it too often where I get like hit really hard over someone who's in their mid-90s dying, but Vin Scully is different. He was just that special.
Well, I mean,
that's coming from someone who is a hardcore pinstripe fan and does not like the Dodgers very much at all.
Well, think about it. Just as a sports fan, it's been a very tough couple of weeks, because last week we lost Bill Russell, and now this.
Oh my gosh!
And even just as a regular, even if you outside of sports, it's been tough, because we lost on Monday. We lost Olivia Newton-John, and obviously, Grease. I mean, again, I was born in '90, but I've seen that. I don't see many movies, but I've seen that a million times. So
yep, me too. Me too, and I'm like 5-6 years younger than you. So
sure, yeah, no, for sure. But I mean, yeah, I think the only I remember getting emotional, when game show legends pass away. Obviously when Alex Trebek passed away, that was hard.
That hit me right in the feels. I love Alex Trebek, and I still say he's probably the best host in game show history. You could very well make that case.
He's right up there. I mean,
you and I are big Jeopardy fans, so
yeah, I'm big game show fans too, and I mean he's right up there. I mean, if he's not number one, Hank, I'd say he's top 3.
Yeah,
I mean, he's right there. So, but one of the things I'll be doing over these next couple of days and still doing, you can go on social media. That was one of the things too that also struck. So this happened like 11:30 on Tuesday night. Obviously, I was asleep by then. It's very rare that I stay up that late unless I'm out doing stuff or there's something on TV major that I have to stay up for. But the next day, when going through the highlights stuff, you could go through social media, and people were posting Vin Scully clips, him talking during games, like I'd mentioned at the stories, just about anything in general. Whether it's current events, old baseball or sports stories, and it was like, wow, that's like remarkable. And there won't be anybody like that.
No.
I mean, I guess you could say like John Sterling on the Yankees radio network, he could talk about stories, but that's still not even the same because that's radio versus TV. But yeah, no, it's
now you're making me sad thinking about the possibility of losing him. But
no. Listen, look. I mean, I could say that on the game show end too, and I'm not going to go there. But I mean, look, John's still doing games, you know, and he's we don't know about any health problems. I mean, he's cut back his schedule a little bit, but he's still doing the games. So you know what? You got to cherish it. Enjoy every game like you enjoy every day in life. That's what you got.
And he still sounds pretty damn good. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean, has he missed a step? I mean, that's natural. But you know what? I mean, there aren't many 80.
Sam Rosen's missed a step, but I still love Sam Rosen with the Rangers.
Yeah, and you know but you know he takes some Range games off and he's cut back because he doesn't no longer do the NFL and Fox. But you know what? He's still going strong. I mean, in today's day and age, when people get to live longer lives because of technology and doctors and stuff, I mean, we could see announcers, you know, doing this for years upon years upon years, and the broadcasting industry is strong. You know what? You've got a lot of good young up and coming guys, and you got good guys. You have guys right now that are like at the top right now that are pretty young too. You know, I'll go back to the NFL and Fox for a second, which just on Monday released their broadcasting teams for the upcoming season. Their lead guy right now is Kevin Burkhardt. I mean, Kevin Burkhardt, somebody could do this for 30, 40 years. Their number 2 guy this year is Joe Davis. Think about that. So the broadcasting business is going strong, is going to be strong for a while. But obviously the guys like Vin Scully, you know, Dick Enberg, all those guys who we grew up on, we'll always remember them.
I'm still sad about John Madden too.
Oh, that absolutely. And Pat Summerall. Yeah.
Yep.
You know what? And it just makes me think of a great moment between those two. And it doesn't even have to involve NFL football, but we'll say that for off the air. But yeah, Vin will be missed. But you know what? The tributes, the memories, and you can always remember him because you could go on social media, you can go on YouTube and go back and watch some of his old games, and he'll always be there. But he'll be missed, that's for sure. Hank, the biggest story in the world of sports this past week was Fernando Tatis. And it's crazy because last week, you and I on the show were talking about the Padres when they got Juan Soto at the deadline. You know, they lost to the Dodgers and that got swept by the Dodgers. And we were thinking that Tatis was actually close to making his return this year. And now all of a sudden, a couple of days before he was expected to return, this story breaks that he tested positive for a PED. So he's suspended 80 games. And boy, you know, and of course, you know, in his originally he uses the word inadvertent, which of course is a bunch of baloney. But boy, now you think about it, and this changes a lot of things, you know, from the Padres' perspective now, because they will all of a sudden now, it just feels like the mindset of the Padres changes here because now they brought in Juan Soto, and you know he had about a 2.5 year window with him, but now this takes Tatis out for the rest of this year and 32 games of 2023. And another thing too is, so here's Tatis who just signed this massive extension of 13 years and 14 years, 340 million. And now this year he's not going to play and he's going to miss at least 32 games of 2023. And this is before even the real money starts really kicking in. So there's a lot to discuss with this, you know, not only the player, but now how does this impact the Padres? Hank, when this story broke, I mean, this was kind of like that Friday night news dump when it broke. What was your reaction, and what do you think now as we sit here on episode 21?
Okay, let me do a reenaction of what happened. All right, let me go all the way up the ramp into my seats. Oh, let me check Twitter. Yeah, no, that was a little exaggerated, but yeah, I think you pretty much get what I mean here. Once he got suspended, to say that I was shocked would probably be the understatement of the year. And all I kept thinking was, first off, the Padres are cursed. I mean, You just assembled a really good lineup. Not only did you add Soto, you added Josh Bell to a lineup that already had Tatis, Machado, and I think to a lesser extent Drury. You also added at the deadline, and now just as things were starting to come together, you lose Tatis for the rest of the season and an early chunk of next season as well. That's a pretty big blow. And look, granted, we knew they weren't going to catch the Dodgers this year. Everybody knew the Dodgers were the better team. Like, it's pretty much fantasy team right there in LA. But to have that happen, that's a big blow. And then, not only did you have the whole sentence statement, I inadvertently had been using whatever you call that thing, classable or whatever it is. One, we know that was a lie because ringworm goes away on its own. You don't need medicine to treat it. And now going into next year, there's going to be even more question marks with the Padres, and he's going to have a lot to prove because you may have lost a good bit of your window depending on what happens in those 32 games. And, you're still stuck being the Dodgers' little brother. So yeah, the Padres are, it's going to be a lot for them to really overcome this, I feel like.
Well, it's you had said it, they're still, the Dodgers are still in that division. But other than that, I mean, the Giants are kind of that swing team. The Rockies and the Diamondbacks, they're not really ready to take the next step just yet. So the Padres can still be a playoff contender. I don't think there's any question about that. They still have a good team assembled, at least offensively. But, yeah, Tatis not being there now takes a huge
there's another thing I didn't mention. Sorry about this.
That's okay. Go ahead.
This happened months after the motorcycle incident. And imagine what happens when he comes back to the Padres. Who knows how his teammates are going to be receptive towards him.
Well, I'll tell you
they're going to be receptive.
Hank, I'll tell you what's very interesting. And it's funny you bring that up because I was going to bring this up too. So if watching Sports Center the next morning, you had Manny Machado and Mike Clevenger, their teammates of Tatis on the Padres. And one of them says, quote, "It's the second time we've been disappointed with him, and you hope he grows up." And think about it now. He has the motorcycle accident.
You don't want to say that about a guy you're paying a lot of money to.
Well, I don't think those two players care about the money angle. I think they care about the fact that they thought that this was going to be a team that with Tatis returning could challenge the Dodgers in the playoffs or any team in the postseason, because I think they actually did have a very legitimate chance. Now, I still think they do because they do still have a very talented team when they're all together. Like you said, Josh Bell coming over, Juan Soto, Machado, Profar, Cronenworth, Will Myers. I mean, they have some powerful guys on that team. But now Tatis, who, historically when he's been on the field, has put up some pretty nice numbers for his age. But him not being there now, and I mean, it takes a major chunk away this year. You can't now have him in the postseason. You're not going to have him for the first part of next year. He's going to go now over a year plus since last playing a major league game. And think about that too. You see highlights of him down in the minor leagues rehabbing, and you're thinking he's not that far away. And then boom, Friday night comes, the old Friday night news dump about this suspension. And I'm wondering, as a Padres fan, how do you feel about that? Because your mindset is, oh, he's close to returning. Look how powerful we're going to be even with his return. And now it's like, now you wonder, what can he be going forward? Because like we've said, second time now that he's made bad judgment, and this is only the start of his huge extension. And the real money with Tatis hasn't even kicked in yet. So I'll tell you, this really is a pretty significant thing that has happened here with Tatis and the Padres. And I think the Padres can be all right, but it kind of is a little bit deflating now because you think without him now, you don't know if you can take that next step and challenge the Dodgers or, say the Mets or the Brewers or the Phillies and Braves, the teams that are still going to be contending in the National League here.
Now, who knows? Maybe the team as a whole rallies around it and says, "Oh, we can win without him." Maybe Tatis ends up being another member of. I'm sure you've probably heard this list. I think it was Bill Simmons who created it, the Ewing factor, where they play well without a star, where a star is either injured / suspended, retires, or gets traded. Maybe that could be the case to the Padres, but even then, I still thought the Dodgers were going to be a major threat to begin with. Then, come on, the Padres just got swept in LA by the Dodgers too. So,
but when you went to the postseason, it can be totally different.
You're right. It could be different.
Can slug their way to wins, and I still think they're going to have to outscore their guys big here to have a chance.
Mm-hmm.
The other angle to the suspension that went through my mind when it happened on Friday was, so we've talked a lot in the past about giving 30-year-olds big time extensions, the 10-year contract extension. We've spoken about that with Aaron Judge as he's going to be 31 this offseason, and he's got a big contract upcoming too. But now, how about the young players now? The Tatises, the Wander Francos of the world, who get those huge extensions when they've barely been in the league and at such a young age. Like we talked about Tatis now, he's in the midst of a 14-year, $340 million contract, and in this season he was only making $5 million. Next year, $7 million. The real money for Tatis doesn't really start kicking in until 2025 when he gets $20 million, and at his age 30 season in 2029 is when he starts getting north of 30. He gets $36 million from 29 to 34, and he's got a full no trade clause through 2028 and a 10 team no trade clause from 29 to 34. So that also makes you wonder now, are we extending guys too early? So you're kind of in that debate about extending guys too early or extending them too late. And now this is the second instance with here that we might be questioning if it's too early. Now, Wander Franco still is a different story because he's been hurt his first year of the extension. But now Tatis now, who's been hurt, let's also be fair too. Tatis has been hurt a lot in his young career. He's been on the injured list multiple times. This year, obviously, the motorcycle accident, now the steroid suspension. It's crazy, not even really just the contract getting underway now, and you start having major questions about how effective and how effective can Tatis be? Yeah.
I do not envy the San Diego Padres one bit.
Well, I kind of do feel bad for them because
I feel bad for them. Don't get me wrong, because you have that plus a whole legacy of failure. I'm sure in the coming years you're going to see Urinating Tree make a video about them as a legacy of failure too.
Yeah, but you think about, they had a golden opportunity for 2.5 years, and they still might have it. When he comes back early next year, you still have 2 years of control with Soto as well. So you still could have 2 years of them. But now Tatis being out, it'll be about, what would it be? A year and a half in between his last major league game from last season until when he's eligible next season. That's just, it starts creating a lot of question marks. He could be rusty. It might actually be this window now of opportunity for the Padres might have actually really taken a hit here with this.
Yeah, I can definitely see it. I can definitely see it.
Because that's the thing you think about with all this is you think about the organization. You don't care about the player because what he did total, like Clevenger and Machado had said, it's the second time you're disappointed with him this year. You don't feel sorry for him. He's just not using good judgment. And so, you're the organization which almost went all in pretty much, giving up several top prospects to get a Juan Soto and go for it this year and in the next 2 years. And now, your young franchise player is missing an entire season because of 2 bad judgments. It's definitely takes a hit.
Yep. And I can hear our producer Nick Morgeson in the background screaming, "I told you so! I told you so!"
It's funny because that's one of the other things I was thinking about too. Was when this news broke, I remember I was actually on the air when I first started with Empty the Bench, and we were talking about it because Tatis was a story during the lockout because of the injury and the fact that he could not get checked or operated on because of the lockout. And I remember Nick saying about the contract how it should be voided because of that. And you wonder now. I mean, if I don't even want to go there, but I'll say it. Let's say he goes through another suspension. If he tests positive again, and he ends up missing a full season, you now really have multiple instances where you try and go for the voided contract. I don't think you can do it, but you definitely do have an argument. So it really it definitely creates some sort of chaos out there in San Diego. We'll see how the Padres respond without him. I mean, I still think they can contend. I still think they could be a playoff team, but I don't know. He seems to be a piece that really could help them. I don't know if they can get above the Dodgers, but make a decent run into October here. And now without him, I mean, they're still going to be very good, but I still think there's also part of it that they need, and he would have definitely helped. Finally, Hank, after week in and week out, episode in, episode out of talking about Deshaun Watson, waiting for the final ruling, it came down on Thursday morning, and we did a special Empty the Bench discussion about this. And it happened, it's weird because it took a while, and it also happened really quick. You late Thursday morning, you start hearing from some Browns insiders and some national reporters that the decision is going to come down, and it does come down right around noon Eastern. And the final decision is that the NFL and Watson agreed on an 11-game suspension, $5 million fine. And so we finally have a Deshaun Watson verdict here in all of this. Now, Hank, you were not with us last week, so I'm going to give you the floor here to start, as we're now about a week since this decision came down. What do you think, and what does this mean going forward, in your opinion?
Well, all I can say is, look, I'm glad it's a longer game, but if I told you that I was satisfied with the way that this was all ruled, I can't really say that, because 11 games, and yet you have another guy who spanned a whole year just for a small parlay. Great. Oh, and by the way, you know what I looked at just out of curiosity? I took a look at the schedule the Browns had. In no way, shape, or form can you tell me it's not a coincidence that his debut with the Browns is going to be against the Houston Texans. No way.
I agree with that. And why I would say that's also coincidence and stuff is, who gets an 11-game suspension? You usually get round numbers. You either get a half a season, like 8 games, 6 games, or 10, or the full season. I mean, how do you come up with 11?
Right.
And all of that, right? But go ahead.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm relieved that it's a little more, but I don't know. In principle, I hate that, he's not getting the full year yet. Calvin Ridley's did a small parlay that you or I are probably done. I've made a few myself. I cannot tell a lie, but and then not to mention just the idea that you're just going to get him back for the Houston Texans. Yeah, totally not doing it for ratings. Nope, not at all.
Yeah, now the next step will be, will they move that game out of, I believe it's at 1 o'clock Eastern on week 13. Will they be moving that game to 4:25, or dare I say Sunday Night Football? I brought that up during our special that we did on Thursday. Now, I don't think they're going to do that, because I don't think NBC would do that, because NBC always is keen on getting a very, very big-time matchup. And let's be totally honest, the Browns and Texans by week 13, if either one of those teams is 500 by then, I'd be shocked. So I don't think they're going to do it for that. But, yeah, it's see, that's you bring up the thing, and this is what always bothers me, is first off, the NFL has had this problem for the longest time when it comes to domestic violence, sexual assault, getting these suspensions right. They seem to never do it, or they never do it well. And this is just another prime example of it. And if the Calvin Ridley suspension had not happened, then I think it'd be a little bit different. We'd be at least in my opinion, I'd be sitting here on episode 22 and telling you that this would be feeling a little bit different than right now, talking about an 11-game suspension versus Calvin Ridley being suspended for a full season for doing something that, sports seems to be promoting like crazy. So yeah, the 11-game suspension, it's just I don't know, and then after this whole comes out, then the co-owners of the Browns just don't help the cause either by saying that Deshaun's a hell of a quarterback. Yeah, you know what? I don't want to be hearing that after this had come down, because we still had so many other people that did not come forth. So it's such a tricky subject to talk about, but because I feel like the NFL never handles this well. And this has been a story that's been ongoing for months and months. And, you appoint somebody to come down with the suspension, and then you basically ignore her opinion in Judge Sue L. Robinson. So all the way around, this was just so poorly handled and executed. And think about it, too. The optics, not only of this, but of the Browns fans cheering Watson when he was able to practice. The fact that Watson was able to go out there in that first preseason game against the Jaguars and get serenaded was an awful feeling. And then you have the Browns owners pretty much defending the trade and telling me that he's a hell of a quarterback the day that this suspension comes down, that they agreed to this suspension. So all around, it's just there's no winners here in all this. There really isn't. And now I guess the only winners could be that we don't have to be talking about Deshaun Watson for at least the next 13 weeks until he returns to the field. But there's no real winner in all of this.
I can already see. Well, actually, no. Tree did make a recent video about the NFL Wheel of Discipline, which, by the way, if you haven't checked that out, it was hilarious. And it's his commentary with how they handled it. It's spot on and lighthearted, just to show you how totally clueless Goodell is with his punishments. And I can already imagine him making another video where he'll make fun of the whole thing once he returns. And yeah, that's going to be must-see TV, but for all the wrong reasons.
Oh, yeah. I don't think there's any you're going to have the broadcast and maybe the pregame shows have a field day over this, but there's no real good field day over it. What, Deshaun Watson's returning to the place that he started, and the fact that he hasn't suited up in 2 years. I mean, and again, I don't think either team is going to be that good by the time week 13 rolls around. And again, that's why, I brought up the idea, would the NFL possibly flex the game out of 1 o'clock? But the more that I think about it, why would you be? The only reason you'd be flexing is for the storyline, and NBC is not going to do that. Unless, you surprise, if both of those teams are somehow competing for a wild card spot, then maybe. But I don't think either of them are going to do it. The Browns are now going to Jacoby Brissett, and they're dealing with injuries. The Texans are still a total rebuilding team the way they are. I don't think either of those two teams are going to be that good by then.
Yeah, no, I pretty much agree.
So now we wonder. So now the thing is too. What happens now on the field here with the Browns going into the season now with no Watson? Now that they know that Jacoby Brissett is under center, they're dealing still with some injuries themselves. How does it impact their locker room? Now you wonder. I mean, not that you really care because this is totally above all that, but where does this go from here?
All I know is he is going to get total backlash this first game in Houston. Can you imagine the signs that all these Texan fans are going to be making? Can you imagine all the memes that are going to be happening once that game happens? And then can you imagine if the Cleveland Browns are even lucky enough to be in a playoff spot? I still don't think they're necessarily better than the Cincinnati Bengals. I didn't even think that necessarily when Deshaun Watson came, but that's neither here nor there. Right. Yeah. Again, must-see TV for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, and think about
Great job, Miguel.
Yeah, and think about the coverage of it is, they'll be more excited about that. I mean, well, not more excited, but they'll be hyping that up during a week where you start having a lot of big playoff implications starting to take place down later in the season. So it's an ugly thing, and this is gonna transpire here for a long, long time. For the rest of this season, probably into next season as well. And think about once Deshaun starts making his huge money. It's just going to be, it's going to be hard. Those signs are going to be on the road. He's going to be playing in some very tough environments. And also the fact that he hasn't really played an NFL game in almost 2 years. It's one thing to be practicing. It's another thing to be actually in big game action. So we'll find out what happens here. But we finally have the Deshaun Watson verdict, the decision, which was agreed to. 11 games, $5 million fine. And finally, we can talk about going forward a show without Deshaun Watson's name. Unless, of course, he violates. So I guess he still has to, comply with stuff. Otherwise, if not, then we could be talking about even a longer suspension. But I don't know if that's really going to be the case. They say this kind of stuff. We'll see if it actually does transpire here. But the Deshaun Watson decision is in, and now we can move on and not have to worry about talking about him and seeing him, and hopefully not anything crazy happening between now and then. Tuesday comes, and the decision comes out that the Nets are going to keep Kevin Durant. So he met with Steve Nash. He met with Joe Tsai, Nets front ownership, and they have decided they're going to keep Durant. And I thought this was amazing because, Hank, this whole summer was about what's going to happen with Durant and Kyrie. And if you take Joe Tsai's comments, his statement that he made, and the Nets statement, what changed is my first question. I don't know if we're ever going to know that, but what changed in that meeting that the Nets now are deciding that they want to keep Durant and go for it here?
I don't know if anything necessarily changed per se, but I think the reason the Nets might be doing this might have more to do with the fact that, KD's entering his mid-30s and he's coming off of a few injuries. And at this point, what are you going to get in return for Kevin Durant? Bupkis.
I think now, yeah.
And, if you've got him and, say what you want about the mercurial Kyrie Irving on that roster, it's not like you're that far off from being a championship caliber basketball team. Now, with that being said, I think it all depends on whether they can truly play together or whatnot. But at the end of the day, as much as you want to get rid of one or both of those head cases, because, I have to lump Kyrie in there too. The problem is, there are two problems. One, what are you going to get in return? And if the answer is probably zero, then should you at least try to run it back one more time with what you have? I mean, remember, say what you want about KD. There's an alternate universe where the Nets are possibly NBA champions if KD's foot is a few inches behind the line.
Yeah,
and I thought baseball was the game of inches, by the way.
Yeah. So here's the statement that Sean Marks, the GM, released last week. Steve Nash and I, together with Joe Tsai met with Kevin Durant and Rich Kleiman in Los Angeles. We have agreed to move forward with our partnership. We are focusing on basketball with one collective goal in mind: build a lasting franchise to bring a championship to Brooklyn. And the one thing I had mentioned when this Durant thing first started was because the words that were being used was a historical return. But that was very early on. And the longer that this dragged out, and it's kind of, you could kind of relate it to the Donovan Mitchell situation. The longer that this dragged out, I think the less you were going to get in this case for Durant, or in that, hopefully in the Knicks case for Donovan Mitchell. And the Nets, I think you're right. I think they're still seeing the possibility that they got a championship run. And the Nets, to me, still the better team. But they still see this run with Durant, with Kyrie, hopefully with Ben Simmons, who you've actually heard some good things about if you're a Nets fan. Joe Harris is still there, and he was hurt last year. He hopefully will come back, and he helps the Nets. And you could fill in those other pieces as you want. But there's no doubt when Durant's on the floor at how powerful and how great he is. But the key is going to be, how much of a season is he going to play? How much is Kyrie? Are they going to be a headache? What is Ben Simmons going to be on this team? And let's also remember one thing too, Hank, and let's be honest, and you probably could agree with me on this. This is not going to be the last time that we are talking about a Durant, Kyrie, Ben Simmons, Nets drama with this organization. If the Nets, let's just think for the heck of it,
it's not
if the Nets start 2-8 next season, you don't think we're talking about the possibility about Durant wanting Nash fired again?
Well, not only are we going to even be talking about it, Johnny, I think it's going to reach the point where he inevitably loses his job.
And that's a shame, because it's really, I go back to last season. I don't know how you can blame last season on Nash. He had so many factors that he had to deal with. He had so many reasons why he had to change the lineup so many times, injuries, whatnot. And then they bring in a guy in Ben Simmons who doesn't even play a single minute for them last year. Yeah. And I agree. And, this is the guy that Nash, that Durant and Kyrie want. It's like, it's like a Hollywood thing. I bring him in, but we're also going to blame you too. I don't know, drama in Netsland, but we're still a very good team. Like I said, that's a team that's still better than, and I don't want to make this a Nick Net thing, but I've said this is Nick. Even if the Knicks get Mitchell, you know what? The Nets are still the better team. They have the more drama, but they're the better team. And that's an obstacle the Knicks have to deal with too, even if they get a Donovan Mitchell. But it looks like, at least for now, the Durant drama is over. Again, we'll check back in 10 games in if they're 2-8, and we will probably relive this conversation, and we'll find out what happens. Well, Hank, we ended that with Kevin Durant, and there was more to the NBA as the summer went along, and we were heading closer and closer to the regular season. Hank, I'm a huge Knicks fan, and there was one person that I was keeping my eyes on all summer long, and that was Donovan Mitchell, who was with the Utah Jazz. A lot of the Jazz were going through a complete overhaul. Rumors had been surfacing that the Knicks were one of the favorites to get him, and we had been following it all summer long on Game On. But the news broke in early September that the Cleveland Cavaliers ended up acquiring Donovan Mitchell after the Knicks were reportedly close to acquiring the All-Star. And, Nick, Hank, my reaction at the time was I would have loved to get him, but not at the price that they were asking for. And we've heard rumors that R.J. Barrett was going to be in there. So at the end of the day, I was disappointed, but I also was relieved, too, that the Knicks didn't overhaul for Donovan Mitchell.
Absolutely. I think the Knicks definitely did the right thing by not mortgaging their future. And I don't really think Donovan Mitchell, as solid of a basketball player as he is, was even worth that haul that the Knicks would have given up. So definitely a bullet dodge, even though I do think we probably could have used him on our team. But at the same time, they're doing pretty well without him as it is. So
Absolutely.
No harm, no foul, I would say. But also, we talked a good amount about Major League Baseball, again, because that sport was in the news a lot. For one thing, there was the shifts, and you and I were very critical about this. And shall we say, it was another decision made by good old Rob Manfred. Couldn't go one show without mentioning that name now, could we?
2022 was the year of good old Rob Manfred, too. And that's something that'll linger into 2023 as well. Yeah, in the middle of September, we found out that Major League Baseball passed significant rule changes, which included the pitch clock, banning of defensive shifts, which we will see in 2023 and beyond. That was a pretty significant day for the future of Major League Baseball. Well,
Now, another thing I want to discuss with regarding Major League Baseball that we covered, the World Series. Now, Houston Astros won that in 6 games over the Philadelphia Phillies. And in my opinion, that World Series, while I wouldn't necessarily call it a classic per se, I mean, there were certainly better ones that you and I saw in our lifetimes. It was definitely memorable for 2 reasons. Number one, the Phillies having that crazy comeback in game 1. And of course, you had the no-hitter in game 4, which I think definitely you could make the case was the turning point of that World Series. Because at that time, the Phillies were up 2-1, and it looked like there was talk that the Phillies might pull off the impossible and beat an Astros team that really was, an absolute buzzsaw. I mean, as tough as it was for us to see them sweep through the Yankees, you just knew it was only going to be a matter of time before they figured things out. Although if you told me a no-hitter was going to happen, I don't know if I would have believed that. But they did. Justin Verlander had a good game in game 5. And then in game 6, Yordan Alvarez hits that big home run. And that was all she wrote.
Absolutely. And Dusty Baker finally getting a World Series ring as manager was a great thing to see over there. We were continuing to follow the Nets drama all summer long. We were wondering how it was going to affect going into the season. Well, we had stuff with Kyrie Irving happening at the start of the year, but also the big deal, 7 games into the season, the Nets and head coach Steve Nash agreed to mutually part ways. Hank, I mean, that was, I hate to say, we after a 2-5 start, we were saying that, the Nets needed to get off to a strong start. Otherwise things were going to happen. And 2-5 was not really a strong start. And Steve Nash ended up leaving the team.
My hot take is this, and make no mistake, I'm not saying that Steve Nash did a good job with the Nets because, I mean, obviously you could have done better with the roster that you had. I mean, look, there's an alternate universe where he probably still has his job, and that alternate universe involves Kevin Durant's foot being maybe an inch or 2 behind the line. But in any event, with that being said, I think he got fired due to circumstances that were really in and out of his control. I mean, look, the Nets had a ton of drama going on at the time, and there was talk that season could be ending before it started. But now, with the firing of him, which looks like it was probably the right move, they went on a big winning streak, and I think they also did the right thing by hiring Jacques Vaughn instead of caving in with the rumor that they could have hired the Celtics coach Ime Udoka, who is still currently serving his suspension. Imagine how bad of a look that would have been.
It definitely wouldn't have been good, but the Nets seem to have been figuring things out over there in Brooklyn, and there has not been a lot of drama ever since that. Well, we ended the year with some sad news in the college football world after what was a very remarkable season, as they get ready for their 2 semifinal games happening at the end of the year. We found out just as bowl season was starting that we lost Mississippi State head football coach Mike Leach at the age of 61, which is really just so sad because we were talking about him a few days prior, just getting ready for their bowl game off an 8-4 regular season. And then after one of their practices, just a few days prior to his passing, they found out that he had to go to the hospital for some personal health issues, and that situation only getting worse. And then we woke up to the news just before we actually did our show that in mid-December that he had passed away from heart complications. And, when you think of college football, as I said, you always think of like Nick Saban's, the Dabo Sweeney's, the Kirby Smarts of the world. But Mike Leach was one of the more underrated, in my opinion, and one of the better head coaches in college football.
Yeah, pretty much every player that played under him said that he impacted them in a positive way. And you look at there were a few players in the NFL that did well and developed through Mike Leach. And not to mention, I think one of the other things a lot of people really liked about Mike Leach was he had a really good sense of humor. I mean, look at some of the interviews that he did. He is definitely someone that will be missed through the college ranks. And, even his peers really had a lot of respect for him. I mean, Nick Saban went out of his way to praise him a lot. And those were both 2 men who you could tell really had mutual respect for one another.
Absolutely. And, his personality, whether it was pregame, during the game, halftime, post-game, after the game, whenever, was always, something to be amazing from. Well, it was an unbelievable start, an unbelievable end to 2022. So let's go back and take a look at some more unbelievable and memorable moments from 2022 here on Game On. This trade broke a couple of days ago. It officially happened that he got dealt to the Cleveland Cavaliers for 3 players and multiple draft picks, unprotected ones and stuff. Now, leading into this trade, the Knicks, I love what they did here. And I did a Monty moment on this originally last week, and then Donovan Mitchell, and then this trade happened, which kind of flipped it around. But Leon Rose and the Knicks gave the Cavaliers a deadline. Gave the Jazz a deadline for Donovan Mitchell. And kudos to Leon Rose. A lot of people have been critical of them, have been critical of the Knicks and this whole process. But I love the fact that they really were starting to put the pressure on Danny Ainge to try and get this deal done. And if they didn't get it done, they were going to extend RJ Barrett. And that's what they did. They gave him a 4-year rookie extension. And I love that. And then, so the deal does not go through, and you hear the reports that, all right, Knicks could still get Donovan Mitchell, but it's going to be more challenging to get it done. And a couple of days later, this comes out, the Woj bomb, like it's been for quite some time now, about Donovan Mitchell going to the Cavaliers. And my first initial thoughts were, I was shocked because I thought the Cavs were out. There was a report saying that the Cleveland Cavaliers were out on Mitchell. So that's another reason why I thought the Knicks were in a favorable position to land him. But look at what the Cavaliers gave up. They gave up 3 players, Colin Sexton, who is among the biggest of them, and 5 first-round picks to get Mitchell. And I think of this as a Knicks fan. Am I disappointed that they didn't get Donovan Mitchell? I'm not. I have been on the record of saying this. Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks would have been nice, but him alone does not elevate the Knicks to a top team. Now, him getting dealt to the Cavs, totally different story. I think right now you're looking at it, and the Cleveland Cavaliers have to be among the favorites in the Eastern Conference to get out of there now with Mitchell.
Yeah, I would have loved to have had Donovan Mitchell on the Knicks, but I think the problem is you're in a conference that is way too loaded. I mean, Johnny, we were just talking about, we were trying to name, a good amount of teams in the Eastern Conference that are probably still better than the Knicks, even if they had gotten Donovan Mitchell. And I believe we came up with at least 5 or 6 now.
All right, so I'm going to, Hank, as you bring that up, let me tell you, let's say the Knicks got Donovan Mitchell, right? And yes. I'm even going to tell you they got Donovan Mitchell without trading RJ Barrett. All right. Okay. So let's say the Knicks got Donovan Mitchell without trading RJ Barrett. So, and everybody be excited. All right, here we go. Knicks on their way. First of all, it'd be a nice start, but here's the reality of it. Are the Knicks with Donovan Mitchell, are they better than the Miami Heat? No. Are they better than the Boston Celtics? No. Are they better than the Milwaukee Bucks? No. Are they better than the Philadelphia 76ers? No. Are they better than the Toronto Raptors? No. Are they better than the Brooklyn Nets? No. Are they better than the Atlanta Hawks? No. Are they better than the Bulls? No.
No.
Are they better than the Cavaliers who didn't get Donovan Mitchell? Cavaliers had a very good year last year. I'm going to say no. That's 9 teams I just rattled off there. The Heat, the Celtics, the Bucks, the 76ers, the Raptors, the Bulls, the Nets, the Hawks, and the Cavaliers, even with the Knicks getting Donovan Mitchell, are better than the Knicks. The Knicks are better than the Hornets, the Wizards, the Pacers, the Pistons, and the Magic. So and this is what I try and tell, because my Knick friends, and I was looking on social media, Knick fans were completely overreacting to this move, that they didn't get Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks makes them a play-in tournament team. He doesn't elevate them to among the tops of the Eastern Conference, but with the with the Cleveland Cavaliers, they now have Mitchell, Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, and Evan Mobley. I mean, that's among the top. That's among the tops right there. With that lineup, you're looking at them being a top 4 team for multiple years now.
Yeah, I am not going to be breaking out the riot gear for this, despite the fact that they missed out on a superstar. And looking at one of the trades that would have been a possibility, I'm sorry, but if you're in a rebuild, there is no reason you should be getting rid of RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, multiple first-round picks for Donovan Mitchell, who I can't even, I cannot say for sure would have definitely elevated the Knicks. Sorry, I cannot keep yawning, but who would have elevated the Knicks to higher than where they are. So they probably dodged a bullet. And again, if they had made that trade, then that really defeats the purpose of a rebuild.
So, Hank, before Mitchell Robinson signed his 4-year extension with the Knicks in early July, Woj was reporting that the Knicks and the Jazz discussed multiple iterations of a Mitchell trade, which would have included, ready for this, RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, Mitchell Robinson, and 3 unprotected first-round picks. I mean, I'm sorry. If the Knicks are offering that and the Jazz would have said no, and the Jazz said no to that, you know what it makes me think? It makes me think that the Utah Jazz never wanted to trade Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right? I mean, I said that right after the trade when Mitchell went to the Cavaliers, that this made me think that the Jazz never wanted to trade Mitchell to the Knicks, and they were trying to fleece the Knicks for more first-round picks and more players. And look what the Knicks have here still. They still have a nice rebuilding group. See, the thing is, and this is what all my Knicks fans are getting, and I'm sure, and I understand this, they're doing this the right way, but the 2 problems the Knicks run into is this rebuild should have started 10 to 15 years ago, and they're doing this rebuild right now in an Eastern Conference that is absolutely stacked. I just listed you 8 or 9 teams that are better than the Knicks, even if they do get Donovan Mitchell. So that's the thing they're running into, but they're finally doing this the right way. Now, what you would like to see is, and this point is fair, this might be the one fair point that Knicks fans have been saying on social media since this trade. You want to see the young kids play more. If you didn't want to trade them for Mitchell, you want to see them play more. I have no problem with that. I would love to see Quentin Grimes get more time. I would love to see guys like Quickly and Toppin get more time. I think that's absolutely fine. But to me, the Knicks have had a good and smart offseason, shoring up the point guard position, which they have not been able to do in years with Jalen Brunson. Now, I'm not going to tell you that Jalen Brunson is the top 5 or top 10 point guard, but I'll tell you right now, he's the best point guard going into the season the Knicks have had in years. RJ Barrett, I think he's only 22 years old. I think he's ready to take the next steps and be almost the next star. Maybe be the next star in the NBA. I think you've got that. I think you've got Mitchell Robinson. You've got young guys. You've got a veteran in Derrick Rose who I think is going to help the young guys out a lot. I like what the Knicks have been doing here. And let's be honest also, Hank, there's going to be another disgruntled star that wants out of a team real soon. And the Knicks have the assets and the players to go get that done. So I sit here right now in September, and I'm not disappointed the Knicks didn't get Donovan Mitchell, because I think Danny Ainge is trying to fleece the Knicks for as many picks and players as possible. When you look at what the Cavaliers gave up, Colin Sexton would have meant the Knicks would have had to trade Barrett.
I was going to say, if you look at Danny Ainge's track record, you probably should be careful when dealing with him.
Yeah, the Cavs gave up a lot, and they are in a better position with Mitchell. He's a better fit with the Cavaliers to go out there and win a championship. Donovan Mitchell to the Knicks would have been nice, but it still only would have been a start. You still would have needed to get another star player or 2 in here in order to really contend. And you're talking about right now in a situation with the Eastern Conference, which is as deep as it's ever been before. We have spent the last several years talking about how loaded the Western Conference is and how weak the Eastern Conference is. It's switched. The East right now will be in a situation going into this year where the 7th or 8th seed is probably over 500. You haven't been able to say that for years in the Eastern Conference. The West will have teams that are under 500 making the postseason. That's how weak the West is and how strong the East is. So that's why I have no problem sitting here. I'm not crying. I'm not disappointed. I did not slam my hand against this table like that the Knicks didn't get Donovan Mitchell, because I know that they would have had to trade the world to get him, and they still would have barely been a playoff team. And I said they've been in a win-win-win situation throughout this offseason. Signing Barrett, you either keep Barrett and trade your assets. You had those assets and stuff to go get him, Mitchell. I understand that. But you look at what they supposedly offered, what Woj said they reported, they offered him, and the Jazz said no. Makes you think, you know what? It's not like the Knicks didn't try, folks. I mean, you're telling me that the Jazz would have said no to Barrett, who could be a star, Toppin, Mitchell Robinson, and 3 unprotected first-round picks, and they said that's not enough, and they said no to that. I mean, that's all you can do. And, it's not like they didn't sign Barrett. Barrett's here. They've got, 4-year contracts. You think about it now. For 4 years now, they're going to have a core group of Barrett, of Brunson, and Randall. And a lot of people are down on Randall. And I'll say this. If Randall bounces back and he's like the Julius Randle of 2 years ago, then the Knicks can, be a fun team to watch this year. He's really going to be the key this entire season. What Randall am I getting? Am I getting the crappy one from last year, or am I getting the all-star one of 2 years ago? Because if he turns it around to what he's like 2 years ago, then it's not a far reach to say the Knicks aren't actually going for one of those 4 teams in the play-in tournament.
Yeah, no,
but in a good way.
Definitely.
I
think the Knicks dodged the bullet.
I think so.
Knicks,
I really do.
dodged the bullet.
Because obviously they would have had to trade everything in their kid brother to get Mitchell, and you know what? He's a free agent again in 4 years. Maybe we relive this in 4 years. He'll be 28, 29 years old in 4. Maybe we're reliving this again. And again, there'll be another one out there, and the Knicks have the assets to go get that. They have you look at it, they've got multiple first-round picks these next several years. You look at the Jazz now have several. You've got the Thunder with several. You can go trade up. You can go trade some of those picks and get a player. I'm fine. I see this rebuild. I like what the Knicks are doing with this rebuild. This needed to start a long time ago, but I think they're finally building a foundation. Thibodeau's back for his 3rd year. You know what? Let's get it done. I'm okay. I sit here right now. I know I did my Monty moment about the Knicks going to get Mitchell, but I'm happy with this. I'm happy they re-signed one of their own players in Barrett to a 4-year extension. I'm fine with this. I like what they're doing. So, yeah, you would have liked to have gotten Mitchell, but if the ultimate goal is to make the playoffs and win a championship, Mitchell would have been a start, but you're still looking at a lot more before you can go get something done. Before you can go get it done. So I'm totally fine with that.
Mm-hmm.
Hank, we get to these rule changes, and they're significant, and they're mostly not good. That's pretty much what it comes down to. So significant rule changes, including pitch clock, banning of defensive shifts, they've been voted in, and they will start in 2023, and they're doing this to increase the game's pace, fasten the game's pace, and increase action. So here's what it comes down to. The league's competition committee, composed of 6 ownership level representatives, 4 players, and 1 umpire, approved of a pitch clock of 15 seconds with empty bases, 20 seconds with runners on, a defensive alignment that must include 2 fielders on each side of the second base bag with both feet on the dirt, as well as rules limiting pickoff moves and expanding the size of the bases. So let's take this down a little by little. Number 1, the pitch clock, to me, that I have no problem with. That was inevitable. I went to some minor league games down here in South Carolina this year to the Myrtle Beach Pelicans, who were the low A affiliate of the Chicago Cubs. And I saw this pitch clock happen. I'm fine with it. You know what? That's something that baseball's been trying to do, but they never really enforced it. Now they're going to enforce it. So I'm fine with that one. Are you fine with that?
Yeah, no, not a problem. The idea of having to improve the pace of the play with pitches, I think that definitely makes sense, especially because you have some pitchers take a long time in between. And I don't necessarily just mean former Mets pitcher Steve Traxel, but
oh yeah, that's really where it started. Yes.
Yeah.
So
I might as well call this the unofficial Steve Traxel rule.
Oh yeah, there's some more, but yeah, I think the Steve Traxel rule, I kind of like that one. So just to further expand on this rule here, the catcher must be in position when the timer hits 10 seconds. The batter must have both feet in the batter's box and be, quote, alert at the 8-second mark. And the pitcher must start his, quote, motion to pitch by the expiration of the clock. And a violation by the pitcher is an automatic ball. One by the hitter constitutes an automatic strike. All right. You know what? We need to speed up the game. Games are taking way too long. That's fine. Again, pitch clock, that's inevitable. You know what? So I'm fine with that. But where do I want to go here next?
The banning of the shift.
Let's get to this one. Let's get to this one. All right. So this one, 2 fielders on each side of the second base bag with both feet on the dirt, as well as with each side of the second base bag, both feet on the dirt. I'm sorry. This is a disgrace. You're telling me, or you're not telling me. You're telling teams they cannot play a certain defense on a team. I mean, come on. The NBA would never do something like this. The NFL would not do something like this. Hockey would not do something like this. I mean, why are we telling a team that you must play defense this way? If they want an infielder to play if you want a team to play 3 guys on the right side or the left side of the infield, or if you want an infielder to play shallow right field, that should be their prerogative. And you know what? If you're a hitter, you need to make adjustments and learn to get on base, because that is your number one rule in baseball, is not to hit a home run. It is to get on base. So go the other way. I feel like Joey Gallo, a name that I know Yankee fans don't want to hear anymore, but I'm going to bring his name up in this regard because he has been very vocal about this, that he's had hits taken away. Joey, that's part of the game. Learn to bunt down the third base line. You've actually seen some guys do it this year. Get on base. Maybe your average would go up a little bit. Maybe your team would actually score some more runs. That's your job in baseball. It's to get on base. All right? The fact you're telling me that we have to alter a defense just to please the hitters, I'm sorry. It's garbage. It is utter garbage that this is happening.
Oh, no. I absolutely hate that.
I am so aggravated over this, because I cannot believe you're basically telling a team that they have to play defense a certain way, because that's not going to limit strikeouts. That's not going to – it's going to help teams a little bit maybe, but if you have a guy going out to shallow right field robbing a hit, that's part of the game. I mean, come on. Why? Because players are complaining that they're getting hits taken away from them, that they're striking out. That's not because of the whole strikeout. Strikeouts are really a big issue, and that's not going to change the strikeout thing. I just don't get it. You would never see in the NFL a team tell you cannot line up in a 4-3 or you have to play in a 3-4 or 4-3 zone, or you tell me that a basketball team's got to play defense a certain while, or hockey that they're going to eliminate the neutral zone trap. I'm sorry, this is utter garbage. And I can't really talk because I'm losing my voice, but I don't care if I lose it at the end of the show, because this is terrible. This rule right here in itself destroys the game. The game's already destroyed with everything that's happened, but this on top of it happens. If they're going to give me the whole left side of the infield, well, you know what? I'm going to learn to do that. And you know what? This is also a shame on the hitting coaches and on the players and the teams themselves that don't tell their players, oh, look, you have the whole left side. Go the other way. Get on base. That's your job. Get on base. Not to hit 490-foot solo home runs when your team's down 5-0. All right?
Like I've often said to you before, what do we need to see more of in the game of baseball? Get him up, get him on, get him in, get him up, get him on, get him over, get him in.
Yeah.
Where has that been over the years? I feel like that's become foreign, over the course of a good amount of time. And I think what team I'm particularly yelling at this about. This one, spoiler alert. So, yeah, no, it's ridiculous. And you know what people often tell you about adapting or dying? If you adapt to the shift and find a way around it, guess what? They're gonna stop shifting. Ever think of that?
They will have changed. They would have done it manually, Hank. That's the thing.
That would be like in the NFL if you didn't allow teams to blitz and taking away a strategy, or if you wouldn't let teams play defense a certain way in the NBA. That's how ridiculous the banning of the shift, the idea of banning the shift is.
So let's just take a look at this here. The position of defensive players can be reviewed because, that's another thing too. So the position of defensive players can be reviewed because that's the last thing that baseball needs is more stuff to be reviewed.
Come on.
So now wait a second.
Me?
So now we're just contradicting ourselves because we're talking about trying to get the pace of play up, but now teams can challenge and review the banned defensive style.
What the fuck? Teams are going to be reviewed for shifts?
The position
Don't
of
we
defensive
have bigger
players
fish to fry than that?
And if a defense is deemed illegal, the batting team can choose to accept the outcome of the play or take an automatic ball instead. Oh, an automatic ball.
What?
Oh, what? So if it's a 3-ball count, they'll get on base via the walk.
That's such an anticlimactic way to win a game. No.
First of all, if there are men on base, they're not going to shift anyway. So if the bases are loaded, they're not going to shift. So they're not going to have to worry about that. Oh my God. I mean, this is an absolute disgrace of a rule. I said this, that is awful. All right. So we've got but wait, as they tell you on the infomercials, but wait, there's more.
Oh, you mean like the Billy Mays line?
Yes, rest in peace, Billy Mays. By limiting disengagements with the mound, either via pickoff move or step off, the rule hold accountable pitchers who would otherwise have a pitch clock workaround. They are likely to significantly increase stolen bases, part of the action, and will be intended to increase. And actually, so Whit Merrifield of the Blue Jays has been on record of saying stuff like this. There have been players that have been out there talking about these bigger bases and the pickoff rules that they are going to increase stolen bases. You know what? I think part of the reason why you don't see many stolen bases in baseball, number one, there's not that many speedy players like there used to be, and number two, they don't get on base enough. Two, look at just the way the game has changed in so many ways, but here's another one too. You don't have speedsters leading off anymore. You have guys look at Yankees are a perfect example of that.
You'll see Judge or Rizzo having
yeah, because they got on base. Now that's another reason Aaron Judge is, not to take anything away from his season, but look how many solo home runs he's got this year. And you know what? Maybe if the guys in front of him went against the shift and just got on base and changed their philosophy, Judge could have 150 RBIs right now, if you think about it. But pickoffs, step-offs, reset the pitch clock. The rules would limit pitchers to 2 for each plate appearance. The number would reset if a runner advances. A pitcher can make a third pickoff attempt, but if it's unsuccessful, it will be a balk, allowing the runners to move up a base. Okay, again, I don't like this rule either. I know that people don't like when they throw over 3-4 times in an at-bat. Again, that should be the pitcher's prerogative. That should not be a problem. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What else do we got here? Bases will increase from 15 to 18 inches square, with expectation that the larger size reduces collisions around the bag, along with slightly shortening the distance between bases. See, I don't mind the bases increasing because if they're doing that to try and prevent injuries. But yes, they are actually now going to shorten the distance between the bases. See, I thought they were also going to increase the bases because the umpiring has been so horrific that maybe they'll give them a better chance to get a call correctly. So that's an interesting one because now the bases are shortening. Additionally, teams will be granted an extra mound visit in the 9th inning if they have exhausted their 5 allotted visits. If a team still has visits remaining, it does not receive an extra one. This is just an absolute. I'm sorry, these rule changes. I'm just going to be blatantly obvious. I'm just going to be blatantly obvious with this, folks. I'm going to make this very, very simple. These rule changes just suck. All right. I'm sorry. There's some that are all right, but just the whole general philosophy of this idea just sucks. The promotion of this game is awful. When you look what's going on in baseball this year, you have just unbelievable moments happening, and I just don't feel like they're getting any recognition whatsoever. The game has changed. The lockout has now totally destroyed the sport, and now we're having rule changes that are going to affect next year. And this is what I had said when we started Game On, when we did our baseball show coming out of the lockout. I had said this to people, and this is coming to fruition. The sport's damaged, but the worst of it has not even started yet. It's starting next year, and this is terrible. And you know who's at fault of this? Who it starts with?
Hold on. Let me get this picture that I'm about to flash up on the screen ready for you.
There he is, right there. I'm so tired of talking about him. I really am. It's.
Yep, there we go.
Yeah, and he's probably, when they were announcing this last week, I didn't see if he had a press conference after this, but he probably went up to the podium and he probably smiled. Just like he smiled when the lockout was happening. He probably smiled at these rule changes because he thinks it's going to be so exciting. I don't know, folks. This sport that I grew up watching in the 90s, I know it was different even in the 80s and obviously well before that, but this game that I grew up watching in the 90s and early 2000s is not the same sport I'm watching today. And I should be watching this pen and chase. I mean, I'm watching this pen and chase stuff, but I always had that feeling in the back of my mind about the lockout and now going into next year. We should be celebrating the fact that we got some exciting moments. We got the Mets who are entering Tuesday, game and a half in front of the Braves in the NL East. We have the Yankees holding on to the AL East. We could be seeing these two teams on a collision course later in the year. We've got the Dodgers who are the first team officially in the MLB postseason. We've got Albert Pujols making a run at 700 career home runs. We've got Mike Trout, who has hit a home run in 7 consecutive games.
He's one away from tying the record.
Yeah. And I think it's appropriate. It's a home run last night, and the Angels lose. I mean, that just sums up the Angels' organization, right? I mean, it's unbelievable.
I think
there are cool things happening in this game, but it's just
that the Angels are losing despite Trout and Ohtani homering in the same game.
And that's why I don't want to hear anything from Met fans tell me that the team's cursed and stuff. Because look at the Angels and what's happening with them. They have Shohei Ohtani, unbelievable moment. Shohei Ohtani should be one of the players of the year in any sport because of what he does. But you wouldn't really know about it unless you really were paying attention. Mike Trout's got 35 home runs in 100 games this year. If he was fully healthy, he'd almost be somebody you'd be talking about making a 50 or 60 home run kind of season. But yeah, these rules, they suck. They suck the life out of this game. I'm sorry. These rule changes were not a good day for baseball. Big news that breaks literally right before we hit the record button is with the Brooklyn Nets. And we were going to talk about the Nets originally with Kyrie Irving. We're going to get to that. But, Nick, this was an absolute bombshell. Well, if you want to say it was a bombshell, but this was an unbelievable way to start November and to start the show with. As 7 games into the NBA season, the Brooklyn Nets and head coach Steve Nash mutually parted ways. That's what is being reported from Woj. And I had joked with you, and I said it on this show too, that the start of the season was going to be very interesting from the Nets side, because let's say they had a terrible 2-8 start in 10 games in. Would Steve Nash make it through? Well, here we are 7 games in, and they parted ways. And this is in the midst of the whole drama of the offseason with Kevin Durant, with the continuing never-ending drama of one Kyrie Irving, now with Ben Simmons, who's back, but now he's hurt. Already, it's been a drama-filled start to the season. And, Nick, you are the huge Net fan, and I know you're a huge basketball fan. And, again, it's great to have you on this week. This story, which broke earlier on Tuesday, what is your thoughts about it, and where do the Nets go from here?
One, I'm not surprised by this news because you heard me say it last season. You heard, and everyone said I'm crazy. He should have been fired before this season started. If they knew they were going to fire him 7 to 8 games in, they should have fired him before the season because it was already in their mind that they were going to fire him. Now, we talked about the KD drama all offseason. Trade me. I don't want to be here. Fire Steve Nash. Fire Sean Marks. Joe Desai, I'm not coming to camp. Trade me or I'm just going to sit out. Well, we all know that the head coach gets blamed for everything in any sport you talk about. And then just add the Kyrie drama on top of it, whether it's him and his Nick Federa from my show, Empty the Bench, will say, let's just chase him with a needle until he gets his COVID-19 shot. Or now he's promoting on social media. Now, I don't know if most people saw this the other night. After the game, during the post game, he was doing his press conference, and Nick Friedel of ESPN was asking him about stuff being posted on social media, which we all know social media is the beast, especially with athletes, because they will post anything and anything that they have their beliefs about. Now, the one thing I'll give the benefit of the doubt on is that Nick Friedel went a little too far back in the timeline for something that was already being reported, because I think it was like a month or two ago, he posted a clip from Alex Jones about conspiracy theory. Don't get me wrong. It was still weird and crazy that he did it. But why do you have to go back a month or two for something and then bring up the current thing in the timeline that's happening now? So if you don't know what he posted now, he promoted a movie. Now, I can't say the name of the whole movie because the movie is very vulgar in title. What I can nicely say is he posted a movie called Jews for N-Word, is the nicest way I could say it. And Nick Friedel of ESPN basically said, why are you promoting this? Why are you putting this up there? And Kyrie basically said, I can promote whatever the bleep I want, and I can do what I want, and stop dehumanizing me. First of all, dehumanizing you, I'm lost for words of this whole situation with everything. And we'll get to the Kyrie situation in a moment, but I'm surprised this didn't happen last season. Let's put it that way. So,
yeah. So let me ask you, because I know you follow the Nets more than I do. I mean, I'm a huge basketball fan too, but I root for the other team in town. If they were going to fire him or mutually part ways this early in the season, I mean, what did it take for them to do it 7 games in? Like, like you were saying, why didn't this happen off season? Why didn't this happen in the last year? Why did they have him going into this year and then he doesn't make it 2-3 weeks into the season?
I think part of it has to do with what they say in baseball they call it justifying the trade, but in this case in the NBA they're justifying the head coaching hire, where they didn't want to fire him because then it looks like they lose if they fire him and let him go. Now, the irony is, who approved the hire of Steve Nash? KD and Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
It's no one else. The Nets ownership probably wanted a more experienced coach, but you have to satisfy the stars in the NBA, in today's NBA.
Yeah.
So guess what? Now you have a giant mess on your hands. Don't get me wrong. I like Jacques Vaughn. Jacques Vaughn was a Net back in the day. Really good role player back in the day, and has become a really good assistant coach, and I think eventually deserved a head coaching position. But this is not the right circumstance in that regard to be getting a acting head coaching job. Now, I don't think he's going to be there. I think eventually they're going to bring a name in. Now, I don't agree with guys like Screamin' A, Stephen A. Smith, and Woj, who all of a sudden said, well, the Nets should go after Ime Udoka.
Yeah, so just to bring that up to speed here, Woj did also go on to add that Ime Udoka, the coach who was suspended from the Celtics for the season after what happened up there, that he could be in play. I know Stephen A. tweeted out that maybe Mark Jackson should get a shot. And
Quinn Snyder.
Quinn Snyder is another one, the former Utah Jazz coach.
Who I like. I think he got a bad rap in Utah. Like, he had those teams winning. They were going to the playoffs every year, and they just were not a good enough team to compete.
Yeah, at the time, the Western Conference was the loaded conference. Now the conferences have switched, and maybe that's another reason why the Nets feel like they have to make this move with Nash. But there's so many wrinkles to this, Nick. I don't know where to go from, because this team is just, be the headache with Kyrie, with Durant, whether it's, him not being able to stand the court because, he's getting up there in age, or his what happens with him, like what happened in the offseason with him. And Ben Simmons, who was really a wild card in this whole entire situation. Now, of course, it's a few games in, and he's hurt already again. So you have that to deal with. And then after that, I mean, you know what? It's kind of a drop-off because all your valuable role players that you had in years past are all gone. So this is a very, very tough spot for the Nets to be in right now.
I'm just going to say it now. Nets fans are going to be in for a long season, a very long season, because you might have KD, you might have Kyrie, and you have guys like Seth Curry who are nice players. They're young players, and I think they did a good job bringing him back and keep him in the organization. Excuse me. But we're back to square one all over again, essentially, before Kyrie and KD came in the mix. Now, maybe they have a chance to turn it around because KD is a star, and I don't know, it's kind of questionable calling Kyrie a star at this point. But
I'd say Kyrie's a good basketball player and just leave it at that.
Yeah, he's a good basketball player when he wants to be, is really what I should say.
Because, I mean, the list with him goes way back. I mean, it goes back to even when coming out of the COVID year that he decided he didn't want to be part of the bubble.
It's not even that. It's just like he didn't want to be vaccinated, so that pretty much did him in.
The crazy thing is that was like the least of the craziness that he's had with him.
But let's put a bow on Steve Nash, because Steve Nash, and you heard me say this a million times when the hire happened, should have never been a head coach.
You have been consistent in saying that, yep.
He didn't coach in the high school level. He didn't coach in the college level. How do you go from... Don't get me wrong. Point guards are kind of like catchers in Major League Baseball, where they have a good sense of how they're game managers, if you think about it. So maybe that was the excuse why they gave him a chance. But no coaching experience. How do you hire someone with no coaching experience? That's the last time. And this is another frustrating thing, not just with the Nets, but with the NBA. Stop listening to your stars when you're hiring a head coach.
Well, that's the thing. That's one of the things with the NBA. The stars have all the power. The players have all the power. You know, we've seen that with LeBron out there in LA. We've seen that here with Durant and Irving and such. I mean, it's just like that. And as far as, the point guards things with coaching, it reminds me of Derek Fisher. Remember that whole saga, whether it was with the Knicks or who else?
Yeah, but Derek Fisher had a different situation where eventually he had off-the-court issues.
Right. But, I mean, just the whole – but, he wasn't a good coach with the Knicks when he was on the court either.
Or the Lakers.
Or the Lakers, yep. And I think the Knicks are still paying him, by the way. But
they are, yeah.
Yeah, but now we just wonder where this team goes from here. And it's really been – and, you were talking about Nick Friedel from ESPN. He had a very good piece that came out Tuesday about how the Nets have devolved into chaos in a matter of weeks. And it just really goes back to the offseason with Durant, whether he reportedly had asked for Nash and Sean Marks to be fired, and then he reversed course, whether it was with all the situations with Kyrie. It's been so much and so quick. And I remember when we were talking about the Nets before the season started, I said the start of the season was going to be absolutely critical, because if they'd gotten off to such a slow start like this, what would the rumblings about Nash being fired come up again? Now, again, this was either firing or a mutually parting of the ways, which is how they're calling it. But I just don't know where the Nets go from here. That's really what it is. And Jacques Vaughn's had some experience and some success as a coach before, so maybe he is the guy. But this roster is just so, it's just so
a mess. Just say a mess.
Yeah. Well, see, and here's the thing, and I don't want to go back years on it because we're going to transition to the Nets on the court, even though we're going to talk about this. This whole thing with the Nets now has gone back to the day that they traded for Harden, because they had, all those good. They didn't have stars, but they had very, very good complementary players. And
I'm still mad about, I can't remember the guy's name. Is on Cleveland now, part of that team.
Jared Allen.
Well, Jared Allen, and then I think they traded someone else. LeVert.
Karis LeVert was great here.
I think for some reason, the Nets were trying to jump the gun too quick. trying to make a team of stars. And by the way, that goes back to the pressure of the Big Three, which if you look around the NBA now, the Big Three doesn't exist.
And it doesn't work.
Because when you bring in a Big Three, you can't afford the rest of the roster.
Yeah, I mean, unless they're all taking the minimum, and that's almost impossible to do.
The only time that worked, I can only think of 2 instances that really worked. Miami and the Celtics.
Yeah, and those are the Hall of Fame players, yeah.
And the Celtics, Pierce, Allen, and Garnett was on the backside of his career to begin with. Paul Pierce was really on the backside of his career, and Ray Allen was really on the backside of his career, but since he's such a great shooter, it fit the roster.
3 Hall of Famers, by the way.
Right, and then Ray Allen jumped ship and went to Miami and won there. So,
yeah. And you look at that Miami Big Three Hall of Famers, the Nets so-called Big Three at the time: Harden, Durant, and Kyrie. 1 Hall of Famer in that list, maybe.
Maybe Harden because he's a good scorer. Maybe
Durant. I think Durant's
no. Durant definitely because even though he got help winning a championship, won championships. It'll always be Steph Curry first, but that's a discussion for another day.
Yes.
But excuse me, James Harden will always be known for being a good scorer. His playoff ability, that's a whole different question. Yeah. But by the way, I would even say Kyrie is technically a better player than James Harden because Kyrie has more playoff ability, even hitting a clutch shot. I know most people block this out of the memory, but remember the Cleveland Golden State series where Kyrie hit the game-winning shot in the NBA Finals. People forget that.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's fair. Yep.
James Harden of that group is still the questionable target. Now, everyone's going to say in the offseason, and we'll get to the Phillies, the Sixers in the offseason, and what happened to them. But Harden taking less money, well, even though he's made $250 million in his career, so what's taking less money to him? But I don't know. I'll try to move back to this. So Steve Nash eventually was going to be gone. It wasn't a matter. He was not going to last the whole season, in my opinion. Eventually, he was going to be the scapegoat. And that kind of leads to what happened on the court also.
Yeah. I mean, they had a 4-game losing streak there earlier, but I don't know. I just don't know where the Nets go from here. As the Houston Astros have done it, folks. They beat the Philadelphia Phillies in 6 to win the 2022 World Series. I don't think really much of a surprise because the Astros came in to the season as one of the favorites to win it all. And it was a great storyline going into the series. You know, the Astros being that, favorite team to win it all. When I mean favorite, I mean record-wise and, roster-wise. But the Philadelphia Phillies were one of the better stories in the league. 87 wins in the regular season, getting into the playoffs, getting past the Cardinals, getting past the Padres, getting past the Braves even too, to get to the World Series, and really giving the Astros, for the most part, a challenge because this series did feature it all. It featured power. It featured pitching. It featured defense, offense, all that kind of stuff. So, Hank, when you look at this whole series in general, and we'll break down each game, and we'll go through the moments of the series, but overall, your thoughts about this entire series and the Astros winning it all?
So, Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you and I pretty much hit our prediction right on the nose. I, for sure, definitely had the Astros winning that World Series in 6 games. And, I made a brief video about this on the Review and Preview Sports channel, which you can definitely check out if you want to give that a subscribe. Sorry for the mini shameless plug there.
That's
but
quite all right.
But I'm going to say this once again. Even as the Phillies were in the process of clobbering the Astros in Game 3 of that World Series, which, by the way, that was actually during the time where I recorded the last episode of that season of Hitting for the Cycle. That was with my guys, John Check and Mike Hewitt from the Baseball Banter. So that was a lot of fun going over that game. But if you watch that show at all, you will recall neither of us were taking the bait on the Philadelphia Phillies. In fact, I think we all pretty much said that it was only a matter of time before the Houston Astros would go out and expose the weaknesses that the Philadelphia Phillies had. And the thing I said was, talk to me after game 4 before you can really say that this was a series. And look, I knew the Astros were going to win that game. That there was no doubt in my mind about that. But for a no-hitter to happen, and only the second one in World Series history, third in postseason history, and the first combined no-hitter in World Series history to occur, that was so impressive. And you look at the story of Christian Javier, pitched 6 strong innings, and then the Astros bullpen was absolutely lights out. And then, of course, you had that big sixth inning where they scored 5 runs off Aaron Nola. I knew after that win that was definitely going to be the turning point. And, then you go to game 5, you knew that was also a bit of a swing game because the Astros were starting Justin Verlander. And prior to that game, Justin Verlander had not won a game in the World Series, despite the fact that he already had a ring from the 2017 Astros. So he had a little bit of pressure that he was trying to get off of his back in that game, but he pitched 5 strong innings. The only blemish he really had was that home run to Kyle Schwarber, and then Jeremy Pena hit that big go-ahead home run in the 4th inning, I believe. And for them to get 5 strong innings out of Justin Verlander, I thought that was absolutely huge because, I had another side discussion with John Check, during one of the games, and I said that, that Justin Verlander has to be taken out earlier this time if you're going to win this game. Because if you look at what happened in game 1 of the series, as soon as the Phillies started to score a few runs, I think Dusty Baker probably should have removed him a bit sooner, but this time there was no such issue coming up. The Astros scored just enough runs to win, and the Phillies did give them a bit of a scare. You had the runner on first, 1 out. JT Realmuto hit a big fly ball in the 9th inning, but I think that McCormick catch was definitely huge because if you have a few runners on base in that situation, that's probably a really dicey situation for the Houston Astros bullpen. But they got out of it. It's a totally different game, and they go back to Houston having 2 chances to essentially clinch the title at home. And, in game 6, now here's where, in my opinion, game 6 changed. Phillies are up 1-0 with the Kyle Schwarber home run. And Kyle Schwarber, in my opinion, probably would have been the MVP had the Philadelphia Phillies managed to come back. He had a really good series for the Philadelphia Phillies. And I knew that he was going to be a really good acquisition too. You can go back into the review and preview archives. I made a short video about that acquisition too. Again, apologies for the shameless self-plug, but back to that game. Here's what I think the real turning point was. Martin Maldonado came up and he gets hit by a pitch by Zach Wheeler. And, if you look at that hit by pitch, it looked like he may very well have leaned in and done that on purpose. And I think that was a big deal because Maldonado was probably one of the last guys in that lineup that you would see as a threat to come up big, in an inning like that when trailing. No. So he gets hit. And then the next guy up is Jeremy Pena, and Pena gets the single that puts runners at the corners. And I think if either one of those guys are out, I don't know if Alvarado comes in to face Yordan Alvarez. And in my opinion, I still probably would have left Zach Wheeler in because he only had 70 pitches, but you made the change because, that's just the way baseball managers are. You rely on third time through the order and all the analytical stuff. And so it meant that you had to take out your ace, which I didn't really like because in my honest opinion, Zach Wheeler was the best pitcher in the Philadelphia Phillies rotation. I thought they should have tried riding him and letting him get it out of that situation on their own. But nonetheless, Yordan Alvarez hits a bomb off of Alvarado and it right into dead center field too. That's a typical home run that older Yankee fans might remember seeing Dave Winfield hit, and Yankee fans of our generation probably are used to Judge hitting on a daily basis. So that was essentially the game right there. And like I said, I think that hit by pitch really was what set the tone for that game. And, whether Wheeler would have kept on going with the shutout, who knows? But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. The better team ended up winning the World Series. So big congratulations to the Houston Astros. And look, you might expect me as a Yankee fan to say stuff about their past allegations of cheating and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I don't really think you can, because the Astros have won a second World Series within a span of 6 years. And remember, this was, as I mentioned, this was also their fourth pennant in the 6-year span, which is really impressive regardless of how you look at it. And I think we keep forgetting that most of that 2017 team isn't even there anymore. In fact, the only guys you really have left are Bregman, Altuve, Justin Verlander, even Lance McCullers Jr., actually, one of the forgotten members of the 2017 that you don't really talk about. And, of course, Yuli Gurriel. And even when Gurriel got injured, like, it really didn't matter. The Astros just never skipped a beat. They had little to no flaws. They were absolutely, like, deep 1 through 9 in the order, and pitching rotation. They can throw out any guy, and even if one guy has a bad day, they can go out throwing a no-hitter at you the next day. And as far as their bullpen goes, if any starter gets in trouble, they can have any one of those guys getting out of there and just like putting down the fire. They were an absolutely impressive team. And in my honest opinion, I think, cheating or not, I think this team was probably probably better than the 2017 team. I mean, lineup wise, it's about as close as you can get, but pitching rotation and bullpen, got to give it to this year's team. I think this was definitely one of the better teams in baseball I've seen in my lifetime. And before I let you keep going, I do have a few players that I want to say that I do feel happy for. One's Trey Mancini, who, as you recall, dealt with cancer a few years ago. He not only survived that battle, he had a good bounce back season for the Orioles, gets traded to the Houston Astros at the deadline. Now he has a ring. Then you have Jeremy Pena, who, it's not too often you have a shortstop replacing big shoes from one of your star players from the previous good Astros teams, but he passed that test with flying colors, and he became, fun fact, the first rookie to win an MVP of the World Series, and he also won the ALCS MVP, so hell of a postseason for him. And it really just goes to show you the difference between the Astros and the Yankees with how they develop their talent. The Astros are just an absolute factory, and they do it right. I cannot stress that enough. And then last but not least, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Dusty Baker, who had managed for quite a long time, but he has been involved in Major League Baseball for, I would say, a shade over 50 years. Fun fact, he was actually teammates with Hank Aaron as an Atlanta Brave when he was a player. So that gives you an idea for how long his career was. He was on some pennant-winning Dodgers teams, including the 1981 World Series, but as a manager, he's the only one to win a division with 5 different teams. The other 4, of course, being San Francisco Giants, the Chicago Cubs, Cincinnati Reds, and the Washington Nationals. But he never was able to get that elusive World Series title, but he finally earned it. And he's a guy that pretty much everyone in Major League Baseball universally respects. And now with that World Series ring, I think that ends the debate as to whether or not he is a true Hall of Fame manager. He will definitely get that plaque in Cooperstown once he retires.
Yeah, that's for sure. Wow. So what do I take out of this series? You know what? The Astros they're too good. I mean, this is what, we were going back to with the Yankees here about there's when the Astros swept them 4 games and everybody's complaining about the Yanks and stuff. And I'm like, guys, this Astros team's just way, way too good. You highlighted some of the things too. Carlos Correa no longer there. Who do they put in? Who fills in? Jeremy Pena, who replaces him. Look at center field. George Springer's gone, and Chas McCormick, who had a very good offensive World Series and defensive one. That great catch out there in Philadelphia. I mean, it's just absolutely it was just crazy. And this bullpen that the Astros had, which is historic, if you look at what they were able to do in the postseason, just absolutely unhittable. They
only gave up like 2 or 3 runs in the entire round.
Yeah, I mean,
that's about it.
That's why, when Javier got taken out of that no-hitter after 97 pitches in 6 innings, I didn't think much of it because, this bullpen's so good, they probably could have kept it going. And it's the second time this year that Christian Javier and the team pitched a combined no-hitter. So I think that just goes to show you. But, yeah, they're just so good. And this Phillies team, I have to say, did them a decent challenge. In Game 1, the 5 runs off Verlander, the 5 home runs in Game 3, they were up 2-1. I mean, they definitely gave Houston a run for their money, but Houston's just way, way, way too good, and it's just all the way around. And one thing I had said when you went into the series to watch was Jose Altuve was due for a breakout series, and he hit 308. He was 8 for 26 in the World Series. So I knew he was due to have, a couple of hits and get on base. And, he didn't do much at all in the first couple of rounds. And you knew he was due to break out, and he did. Gurriel had a great series. Obviously, we talked about Jeremy Pena. But yeah, that's what, great teams do. And I am thrilled for Dusty Baker because, all the talk had been about how he hadn't been able to win a World Series as a manager. And now he could finally, he gets that monkey off his back. And then it comes out on Tuesday that he is going to come back and manage the team in 2023. So that's a great thing to see too. But yeah, listen, I sit here as a baseball fan and say that I'm happy for the Astros because I think you can put the cheating stuff behind once and for all because this was mostly a different team. There were a couple of guys left over from the 2017 team, but I think the times now are to move on. And as far as a Yankee fan, I look at them and I say, look at how great they are. Look, they're great at, pitching, defense, developing players. That's why I feel like the Yankees actually should try and go down that road and see if they can develop players and try and have some homegrown guys with some veteran presence and maybe change their lineup, their roster construction. I think that's what they have to do. Unfortunately, I think it's going to happen that they're going to lose some valuable players in the process to do that. But yeah, I mean, it really is an amazing job there by the Houston Astros, and that you just got to tip your cap to them. And you tip your cap to the Phillies too, because they came out of really nowhere until about the last month and a half of the regular season, got in to that expanded playoff with 87 wins and were able to really surprise a lot of people and, beat the defending champion Braves, defeat the Cardinals the way they did too with that wild card round with, game 1, 6 runs off that Cardinal bullpen, get past the Padres and the way they did it too. That team is not that far off. If you think about it, they had power. Their pitching actually was better than a lot of people had thought. I mean,
right.
We knew about Wheeler. We knew about Nola. That bullpen was a bit of a concern, but that bullpen actually pitched all right. And, yeah, I mean, there's not much else you can really add to it. I mean, they did very, very well. I mean, you have to give them a lot of credit, too. Rob Thompson, who was thrown into a very, very tough spot after Girardi got fired, and he was able to turn the team around and get them into the playoffs. And you know what? Like we've said in baseball, like we say in hockey, like we say in football, really, get in and you've got a shot. And that's what they're able to do. So the Astros win. And look, I mean, it's not a dynasty, but consistent success for the Astros. Their 4th World Series in 6 years. I mean, you don't see that a lot in sports, in pro sports, because of free agency, of players leaving, other players coming in. It changes your team around. I mean, it definitely changed. So what they're able to do is remarkable. And it's hard to see how this doesn't continue for Houston, because unless, Justin Verlander leaves, that could be something to watch. But you look at this rest of this division, I don't know who's really ready to take the next step. I have a team that I think is going to be very interested in that we're going to talk about in just a second. But
is it who I think it is?
It's somebody that you have mentioned before.
It could be one of two teams. I'm guessing it's either the Seattle Mariners or the Texas Rangers.
Yes. Yep.
Because we know that it's not the Oakland A's. The Oakland, well, that's probably soon to be Las Vegas A's if that comes to fruition. Good old Rob Manfred.
And there we go.
I'm sorry. I know.
I
have more I could say about that situation, but trust me, I really think he's screwing up something by potentially letting him go to Vegas.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I think that's inevitable. I think, not to get off on a tangent, but I think sooner rather than later, you're going to see a pro team from all 4 major sports in Vegas eventually. I mean, you've got 2 already, and now you've got 2 to go. I don't think it's that far off. But, I mean, just to wrap up this baseball season, just an incredible job there by the Houston Astros, what they were able to do, and we'll see. Enjoy now they've been celebrating, I know, but it's just been a remarkable ride. And again, hat tip to the Phillies for giving them a challenge and playing unbelievable down the stretch to get in and really make what was really, for as much as we've criticized Major League Baseball and we've criticized the postseason, it actually was a very, very enjoyable postseason. Maybe not as a Yankee fan, but as a baseball fan, it was very, very enjoyable. But congratulations to the Houston Astros on winning the World Series. Mississippi State head football coach Mike Leach passing away at the age of 61 from heart complications. as somebody who's a big college football guy like myself, I mean, I loved Mike Leach as a coach, and he was a tremendous guy. He was an amazing figure for the sport. I mean, if you watched, the way he coaches, his style, his interviews, whether it's during the game, at halftime, after the game, post-game locker room, I mean, all this stuff comes out. And then it was only a couple of days ago that we got the news that he was hospitalized for heart problems, and unfortunately, it just kept taking a terrible turn. I mean, I went to bed on Monday night, was thinking about this and was hoping for the best, but it was bracing for the worst. And then about Tuesday morning, about 8:30, 9 o'clock Eastern or so, we get the news from Mississippi State that he had passed away at the age of 61. Just a terrible, terrible tragedy for not only just Mississippi State, for Hail State, for the Bulldogs, but really for the college football world. And guys, I'll open it up to you here first. Nick, I'll go to you here first to start. I mean, I know you guys aren't the biggest college football fans, but I mean, if you watch college football, I mean, you've heard of Mike Leach before, so you know him. But just a very, very awful news that broke this Tuesday morning.
Yeah, I mean, 61 years old, not old. He also had some entertaining moments with the media, which I thought was very interesting, going back and forth. You heard the news that he went in with a personal health issue. And when you hear personal health issue, you think it's not the worst thing. You think it's just something they have to go get checked out in the hospital. And then we hear the news that it took a turn for the worst. And unfortunately, now we're talking about it. Unfortunately.
Yeah, so you were right. I mean, on Sunday, the news released about the personal health issue, and he had told ESPN after this past regular season that he had struggled with pneumonia during the season. He was feeling better, and he was actually at practice on Saturday before suffering this latest health issue on Sunday. And the news of him falling gravely ill swept through the college football the last few days, and it really left a lot of us stunned. I mean, I know that. And just as the time was passing by here, the news was only getting worse and worse. And of course, you were hoping for the best through all this. But Hank, what do you have to say about this?
Yeah, definitely very sad. He was one of the more underrated coaches in college football. And Johnny, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Mississippi make a bowl game?
Yeah, that's why they were practicing. That's what they were saying. So he was actually at practice. They were on Saturday, and that's when the news broke that he had that personal health issue. And it's just sad that it's happened so quick. So yeah, now I don't know if they're going to cancel their bowl game because of this. We don't know that just yet. But yeah, no, they definitely were preparing.
They should.
Well, all I know
they should cancel their bowl game.
If they play it, though, I wonder, what kind of tribute they're going to do for him before said game.
Well, I mean, just think about this for a second in terms of football. I mean, I think Nick's right. I don't know how you can even think about playing a game right now.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree.
I mean, this is a big story. I mean, the man was around for... Now, I don't know his whole history. I know he was a Texas Tech coach. And I know that he had a little bit of his run-ins when he was with Texas Tech, some controversial stuff that went down at Texas Tech. I don't know Johnny, you would know this better than me, but I wouldn't say he was exactly the perfect person over the years, but he definitely was good at his job. We can't deny that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think what is he, like 100? He was 158 wins. For him, and
107 losses in 21 season.
Right, 21 seasons, 19 of 21 of those years, I think he made a bowl game. That's what it's going to show. And yeah, Mississippi State is scheduled to play Illinois in the ReliaQuest Bowl on January the 2nd. And again, as of right now, we don't know if that game's going to still be on. I mean, I just am trying to think about this. We know what happened with the 3 Virginia football players that were killed, and they canceled their final 2 games. I mean, it's a little bit different because they were not bowl eligible at the time. And obviously at that point, football is not important. I mean, just that whole grieving aspect, which they're still doing there in Virginia. But so they're scheduled to play on January the 2nd against Illinois in the ReliaQuest Bowl. And again, we don't know if that's going to be the case. But yeah, no, Leach is Leach's resume is very, very good. I mean, you know, when you think of college football, though, nowadays, I mean, the first names you're thinking about are like the Nick Sabans, the Dabo Sweeneys, and, you know, the Kirby Smarts of the world. But, I mean, Mike Leach was it was pretty consistent. As I said, 19 of 21 years in a bowl game. I mean, that's a pretty good resume to have.
I mean, I also looked at a statistic that his 158 career wins ranked 5th among active FBS coaches this season. So, yeah, he's 5th highest in the FBS.
I mean, think about it. When you only play 13 games, at the bare minimum 13 games a season in college, I mean, to win 158 games shows you like how consistent you have to be for how long. You know, how consistent you have to be to have the success. So really just, you know, an awful story. And, you know, if you go on Twitter Tuesday, and I'm sure as the days go on here, you see the tributes pouring in from, you know, fellow
Nick
coaches.
Saban had a really good one.
Who's that?
Nick Saban had a really good one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, Saban's who's definitely coached against Mississippi State a lot, and Mike Leach in his career a lot. Absolutely would know that.
He called him an offensive innovator who always did things his way. Said that his teams were well coached and extremely challenging to defend. They played with poise and toughness, which is a credit to his leadership. Tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, and another thing that you could tell about how great a head coach he is look at the tree of coaches that have coached with Leach. Lincoln Riley, just to name a few here. Lincoln Riley.
Lincoln Riley, and only Lincoln Riley. If you know what movie I'm referring to.
I don't. I'm not that much.
You've never seen My Cousin Vinny?
Oh, I mean, I heard of it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I know what you're talking about.
I'm just going to put this out there. I am not the biggest movie buff in the world. I'll talk to you about sports. I'll talk to you about game shows and things like that till the end of time. But movies are not my thing. I think
My Cousin Vinny, though, is a must.
Okay. I think if I'd seen 10 movies in my lifetime, I'd be saying a lot. I'd be a lot. But just get back to this. So, yeah, Lincoln Riley coach was there. Some of these other names you know of, Sonny Dykes, Cliff Kingsbury, Wes Welker is one of the assistants. I mean, there's a full list from Pete Thamel on Twitter. What's that?
Wes Welker's one of his assistants. Wow.
I think I don't think it's that Wes Welker. I think it's a different.
It's not the same one. It's not the same one.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say if Wes Welker was assistant, how would I have not known about that?
Yeah, but
I would have been living under a rock.
Yeah, but just it's really.
And upon further review, Wes Welker is actually a Miami Dolphins wide receivers coach.
Yes, that Wes,
the one that I'm thinking about.
But I mean, all the tributes that are pouring in here in the hours, in the minutes and hours right after this news broke, has just been it's sad. You know, he's only 61. You know, this day and age, you know, I know plenty of people that are up there in their 60s and stuff and are doing great. So just an awful
60 is considered young.
Absolutely. And you know, I'll just make a game show reference real quick here. You know, on Monday we were celebrating Bob Barker turning 99, and he's still going strong. Knock on wood. Hopefully, we're hoping he gets to 100. And by the way, speaking of movies, Happy Gilmore, of course, you know I know that scene all too well. So
yes.
So that's that. So the tributes are pouring in here, and again, like you guys are saying, we don't know right now what the status of their bowl game is going to be coming up here on January the 2nd. It's obviously it's not important, but it would be, you know, a very emotional scene there if they do play and they are able to beat Illinois in that ReliaQuest Bowl happening on January the 2nd. And that capped an unbelievable 2022 for not only the sports world, but for us here at Game On. Hank, I know this was your first year with us. This was my first year back in doing sports shows. If there's one moment that you could take away from this year, what would it be?
I don't really know if there's any one moment in particular that I can pinpoint that stands out because, I mean, let's face it, when you and I said that 2022 was like a never-ending sports news cycle, I don't think either of us were kidding. But I think one of the bigger takeaways for me was with all the drama, you really took time to appreciate some of the real positive and feel-good stories throughout sports. I would say, for one thing, the Astros combined no-hitter in the World Series was definitely one. And again, I know I'm going to be biased when I say the New York Rangers making their conference finals run in a year that so many people didn't really think was going to happen, or at least not this soon. That definitely was a lot of fun, but also helped for me personally because I was at pretty much every single game of that run. And then, of course, not to mention, you had Steph Curry winning his first ever NBA's Finals MVP in a year where he broke the 3-point record. Those were all great moments, feel good stories, and something I'll definitely be thinking about a lot in the years to come. And fun fact, I also was at the game where Steph Curry broke the record against the Knicks too. So you can see why this year was just so memorable for me, so to speak, in terms of sports moments.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I can't pinpoint one moment because there just was so many of them. And we saw that through parts 1 and 2 here of the best ofs. We started this journey in March, and just week after week, it was just nonstop fun of talking about this. And I think, you take all the little things, and just the opportunity to talk about it here on Game On was just absolutely remarkable. And I'm looking forward to what 2023 is going to bring, because if it's any indication like this past year, I think it's going to be amazing. Speaking of which, I'm curious, what do you think? What's one thing you're going to be looking at going into 2020? One sports story that you're looking at going into 2023, Hank?
Well, a few things. I think one, it'll be how baseball, manages to adapt with the new rule changes. And as you probably can imagine, I am going to be talking about that a lot, whether it be on this show or shameless little self-promotion. I hear there's another solid baseball podcast out there called Hitting for the Cycle that should be starting up again next year. So you can imagine I'll be talking a lot about that, and probably how every team gets to play each other at least once. I'll probably mention how that's going to impact a lot of teams' pennant races. And then, I would have to say, the NBA stuff, whether the Warriors can bounce back after the injury to Steph Curry. And then, of course, there's a lot of hockey stuff that I will be, looking forward to seeing too. Definitely the New York Rangers. I mean, they've kind of had an up and down calendar year of 2022, if we're talking about the 22-23 season. But hopefully, after this video has been uploaded, the Rangers will continue to do better, because as we speak, the Rangers were on a 7-game win streak, which unfortunately ended at the hands of the Pittsburgh Penguins 3-2. But then again, they are a talented team that I think will be able to bounce back. So there's a lot of other stories too that I think will be interesting. Obviously, who comes out and goes to the Super Bowl, but that's definitely stuff that you and I will be talking about in the days and months to come.
We sure will. And I'm going to just, obviously, like you said, the baseball thing is a big, big deal. I'm very curious to see how all these rule changes, how the defensive banning of the shift, how that's going to impact the sport. I feel like the offseason seems to be more fun than the regular season, if we can even say that. So I'm going to be looking forward to that. There's 2 other stories I'm curious to see what happens in 2023. Number one, with the NBA, we've been talking a lot about their possible CBA, possibly it running at the end of this upcoming season. And, with everything that's been going on with them, whether it's been the load management talk or, now with the latest with Robert Sarver, I'm wondering what that's going to be like. And number 2, I'm curious, what's the next steps with Brittany Griner? It's a story that, we've talked about a lot, especially with our friends over on Empty the Bench. I'm curious now, what's going to be the next steps? Are we going to see her possibly back on the court in the WNBA in 2023, which would be absolutely remarkable? I mean, that story just has a movie written all over it. So we will see what the next step with Brittany Griner is going to be. But also, sporting world, it's so unpredictable. I'm very curious to see what everything's going to happen. It's going to be a lot of fun. But there's one thing we can guarantee you, folks. Hank and I will be back in 2023 to detail it all, whether it's baseball, hockey, basketball, football, golf, WNBA, you name it, we'll talk about it. In fact, we will see you back next Tuesday, January the 3rd of 2023 for episode 37 of the show. Hank, you have a safe, happy, and healthy new year.
You do the same, my guy. Looking forward to some more shows with you, whether it be here or whether it be even your your periodical returns to the Review and Preview Network as well. But again, sorry for the shameless self-promotion.
Absolutely. We will be there. So for Hank and Dictor, I'm Johnny Montalbano. Everybody have a safe, happy, and healthy start to the new year. And Hank and I will see you again in 2023.